and welcome to the 495. I am your host, Doug Sparks, editor-in-chief of Merrimack Valley Magazine, here on a, colder than usual. It's not cold, it's colder than usual.
It's fall's fall.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it feels like. It's felt that way for...
Although I'm not sure. It's September, so maybe it's actual fall.
Yeah, there's this... the leaves are starting to come down, and there's that feeling in the air, and there's a certain grayness and a certain sort of autumnal quality. And remember,
it's got that feel.
We had those heat, that kind of heat wave of those hot days, day after day after day, and then it just kind of broke.
Yep.
And now we're like ready for Halloween. It's kind of what I feel.
I bet we have a 90 left in us, though.
Yeah, we'll see.
I'll bet there's one more 90 left.
I'm fine with it if it happens. I stopped by the Merrimack Valley Magazine offices today, and I picked up a copy of the new issue. This is our September issue, and there's the cover article is on women leaders in the Merrimack Valley. You haven't seen this yet?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
I'll leave this copy for you.
I just saw the cover when I went through the Merrimack Valley Magazine Facebook page.
Yeah. The cover's getting a lot of attention. There's some interesting people. So, now, of course, this is important, but I'm going to focus on the stuff that is not so important, which is the MVC, Merrimack Valley CSA piece, which is, so what we have the Horn brothers, who are farmers who are up in New Hampshire, and they use produce that you'd use in your CSA box,
right?
And come up with some sort of dish. This time it was really, really crazy with them. They were in peak season, so I had to cook the dishes, and I'm an okay cook. I can't say this was me at my best as far as what the results.
Did they supply?
I wish the Horn brothers... No, I took care of everything.
See, no, if it came in a box and you just had to do the dish, that'd be one thing.
No. I did the whole thing, and it was interesting. It was a good process, and it's also like I cook a lot, but I cook... I have a routine. I have certain dishes that I do all the time, and to do something like this, take yourself out of the routine is interesting and challenging, and also sort of exposes your own weaknesses.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I never do this. I never, so it ended up like this is a roast beef gratin, and that ended up actually pretty good. That was really tasty. The other dish was the green beans and burrata, and I had never used burrata cheese. I didn't know burrata cheese dissolves like a balloon when you touch it or even look at it.
No.
Yeah, it looks like mozzarella. So you think you're going to get the slices, you just touch it and just dissolves.
Oh wow.
Like I don't know, like a cartoon alien or something like that.
Did I see an ad for the 495 in there?
You probably did.
Can you hold that up for us?
Was it right here? Oh, there we go.
Yeah, it's right there.
Oh, check that out.
Full page ad.
There's us. I wasn't even seeing it.
Yeah.
What I'm really excited about, though, can you see the little picture?
Yep.
The inset?
Yep.
That's my daughter.
I know, right?
That's my daughter. She hasn't been in the magazine before. So this was my daughter helped out with the photography.
Yep.
And the modeling. My other daughter did too.
Who took the photo?
Kevin Harkins. Kevin Harkins. Yep. And you're about to burst into painful laughter when you read the title. It doesn't get shedder than this. No, if we have to rush you to the hospital.
Did you write that?
My wife.
Oh, okay.
That's her first contribution to the magazine right there. She came up with that.
Yeah.
So anyone out there who's dying laughter, you have my wife to thank.
The first pun in Merrimack Valley Magazine history.
We've had anything having to do with cheese. We did Make America Great Again, GRATE, for the last big cheese article we did, and we were kind of concerned about how it would go politically, or people take it the wrong way, which there was no political intention. Nobody did. Everybody got the joke.
My daughter Sarah's been in the magazine a couple times.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Doing what?
She was assisting with Lisa Pelletier on some of the shoots. And,
okay.
She's a pretty girl, so she ended up in the shots.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. I've rambled on enough. Our guest today is named Sophy Tuttle. She's an artist. Right now, she's working out of Western Avenue's Ave Studios in Lowell. Sophy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
You're in your car right now, right?
I am.
Okay, down in Malden, but you just moved to Lowell.
Yep, I moved there on July 1st.
Yeah. So, what are your connections to the Merrimack Valley? Is this the first time you've been into the area? Like how do you know what brings you to Lowell?
Yeah, I grew up in Littleton, which is not so far away. But I've spent most of my professional life so far in Boston, and I was living in Jamaica Plain in different artistic areas, but I was starting to feel like I wasn't getting enough space for what I was paying. So I started to look around, and I found Western Ave, and it's this incredible community of artists, and it's in Lowell, so it's a little bit less expensive, and still easily accessible to Boston, where most of my work is. So it seemed like a really natural fit for me, and they happen to have an opening, so I moved in.
Yeah. So I don't even know if you remember this. We've met once in person. Do you remember meeting me in person years ago?
I told someone the story this morning.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you actually remember. I had a feeling you
Oh,
didn't
good.
remember
This sounds good.
Okay, so you tell your version.
It's when I was out photographing, right?
Yeah.
Or when we were both out. I was trying to remember how old I was. I think I was still in high school,
I,
actually, or
I
I just graduated.
I don't think you're in high school because I think we talked about college and so
Okay.
what happened before people get creeped out is this is at an abandoned mini golf course
Hmm.
in Westford, Massachusetts.
Cannonball Junction. I still remember the name.
Yeah, okay, right. Yeah, Cannonball Junction. And
Wow.
I was into
Hmm.
photography. And I was just wandering around this mini golf place, just trying to do artsy, like
Sure.
pictures and work.
What
And
better
then,
than an abandoned mini
yeah,
golf place?
and then or one of us showed up first, and then you were there with your camera and shooting the same thing. It was funny because it was this like bleak, sort of creepy, like rusty, abandoned mini golf course where we were both kind of shooting, and then I started talking, and you told me you're an art student, and I've kind of tracked your work a little bit since then. So it's just kind of fun, and that's it. I don't think we've ever run into each other since. And now you're in Lowell. Now you're back in
No.
this area after your journey took you in different directions. How would you characterize
Yeah.
your work, your art?
My art has kind of progressed from being more. I went to school for illustration, so I was doing a lot of commercial illustration. You know, chocolate labels and advertising and stuff like that. But it's kind of progressed into more of like an activist, environmental work. So I do a lot of work focused around environmental justice and social justice and social practice, and doing things more in the community and things that are more aligned with my values as an artist and as a person.
Yeah. So and just so people know who can't see the images, maybe they can. Maybe people are putting them in the comments. I don't know. Your work is realistic, right? You draw animals.
Yeah.
You have a lot of animals. Were you ever drawn to like kind of more abstract or more idea based art, or were you always interested in drawing things as they are?
That's funny because I always kind of consider myself a very literal artist. I'm not a very abstract thinker, or I don't consider myself a very abstract thinker. I've always been in love with plants and animals and the natural world, and that's always what's been my focus. I've never really delved into more abstraction or more like different kinds of art. This is it's just what I love, and it's what I've always wanted to do. So it's never been a big question for me.
Yeah, I guess I find that interesting because as someone like I didn't go to art school, and but I know that there are trends, right? And I know that there are certain things that are kind of considered cool at a certain point or uncool or whatever. So it's just interesting to me because I think your work isn't trendy in any way, right? This is what you're doing now is something you probably could have done in the 19th century. And
Yeah,
I just find that interesting to find artists who like are kind of beyond. I mean, thematically, maybe you find yourself sort of the moment, but in terms of style, it's not that. And I just find that interesting. What I see in a lot of your work, animals, and a lot of color and a lot of vibrancy, but I also find a lot of darkness there too, right? And there's like literally there's like skulls and darkness. There's this picture up on your website of this animal called an eye, and it looks a little like the way you draw it. It looks a little like Bela Lugosi. Like he looks kind of vampiric and kind of dark and sinister. And I'm wondering about that balance, right? Because there's so much color and these kind of like peacock flashes of scintillating, but there's also just a lot of skulls. Where does that come from?
Well, it's funny that you mentioned the eye because I made that piece because they're hunted because they're so creepy looking. People are afraid of them, basically.
Yeah.
So it's actually like a fairly accurate. Well, they're very creepy looking to begin with, but I am absolutely drawn to animals like that. The skulls, I mean, skulls are a part of the natural world, and I try to incorporate everything that I can. They're also just a fascinating, as an artist, they're a fascinating form to paint. It's just so many different textures and tones and curves, um, and they also thematically go along with what I'm trying to convey with my work. I talk a lot about extinction and biodiversity loss, and trying to connect humans with animals in a way that, and I think that using skulls is a good way to do that, because it's something that we can see similarities between our own skulls and their skulls and differences, and so I find it kind of a fascinating thing to be able to compare us to them and see similarities.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
you seem a lot of your work is science based, and I'm wondering, was there a point in your life when you had to say, hey, like, were you drawn to science, and did you have to say, I have this artistic side and I have this scientific side, and I kind of have to choose a path?
yeah, so when I applied for schools, I applied to a bunch of liberal arts schools and then probably an equal number of art schools, and I basically just decided to go to the best school that I got into either way. And it happened to be an art school, so that's what I did. But I there's definitely an alternate universe somewhere out there where I became a biologist and I'm like hiding in the bush in the Amazon counting birds or something.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, in by the way, going back to this point you make about the eye and it being sort of like a disturbing looking creature. I mean, this is a problem in environmentalism, right? Is that animals that are cute or are like anthropomorphic in some way, like get attention, right? It's almost like they have like a dolphin gets a different PR campaign than something that might
Hmm.
be very important to an ecosystem, but you can't make it into a stuffed animal, right? So it's just
Yeah.
interesting that you would choose the eye in that way. Do you have favorite animals to draw?
Um, I love drawing birds. I think birds are really fascinating. But as far as creatures that come up over and over again, it's usually at this point it's become very driven by my clients. So, for instance, this month I'm painting 3 whale murals, not through me seeking out any kind of like whale art, but just through people that have seen my work, and like with any kind of artistic practice, you tend to get known for one thing and then you start doing it and then it becomes kind of like a self-fulfilling cycle.
Yeah. So let's speak about the murals. I mean, there's a lot of color, a lot of vibrancy in your work, but the other thing that people should know if they haven't seen it yet, a lot of it is really big. You do a lot of murals. What draws you to murals as an artistic form?
What I really like about murals is that it's the viewership is kind of inherently democratic. So you don't need to have a certain privilege or an ability or access to a gallery space or a museum. There's no paywall. There's no kind of societal expectation of like what kinds of people go to a museum versus what kinds of people don't. You can just be walking along on the street and see my art, and I love that. And it's also a way for me to connect to community in a way that I'm not necessarily really good at. I'm kind of an introvert, um, and I don't necessarily get a lot of opportunities to go out and be sociable, especially now. So I find it just a really nice way to be able to interact with people, and it's kind of my way as an artist to contribute to my community.
Yeah. So, in speaking of these murals, if money wasn't a consideration, in other words, if you didn't have to worry about where the funding was coming from and who wants things done, do you have dream projects? Do you have things that's like, if I had infinite resources, I would do something like this?
It's so funny that you asked that right now because for grad school, we were asked to think of our dream project, and I made this mural project that goes up and down the East Coast, and without getting too much into it, it's about visualizing climate data and how high the water will rise in different places based on how much higher than the baseline temperature we get. So if we get up to the 2 degrees threshold or 4 degrees, just showing that water line. And I think I've actually found an opportunity to do that in Boston, and we'll be doing it in a couple weeks.
Very cool. Do you have, now that you're in Lowell, do you think much about the Merrimack River and any of the environmental issues going on with the river and that ecosystem? Have you had a chance to explore?
I haven't had much of a chance to really get out and explore in Lowell yet, but I am certainly aware of different things in the area. I also I did a mural in Fitchburg, it's probably about 5 or 6 years ago at this point. But we did a lot of research about the paper dyeing factories that were dumping chemicals into the river at that point. That was the Nashua River, I believe. So I believe that there were probably very similar problems here in Lowell with the mills at that time, and I'm sure that there's still a lot of residual effects from that. But I would be really interested to start learning about the environmental issues.
Yeah,
Well.
if anyone's interested, if you go to mvmag.net, which is the Merrimack Valley Magazine website page, and you go to 8 great things to do this weekend, or actually you don't even have to, just go back, to last week's entries, and there was something there on a new documentary called Merrimack River. I think it was called River at Risk. I can't remember the exact title, but I think it was River at Risk.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it's like an hour documentary. It was done by a nature photographer, or it was directed by a nature photographer up in New Hampshire, and it was produced by the Forest Society. And it gets into the dye that goes into the river, and how, like, on any given day, back when the river was at its worst, you wouldn't even know what color it could be. It could be kind of green or yellow, depending upon what pollutants we're getting in there. So anyways, pretty striking stuff. If you're interested in more about the river and where the situation stands, that's not a bad place to start. And then it's also like I just hope now that you're in Lowell, like, you can, there's so much going on with our ecosystem. There's so much going on here that people need to be aware of. So I look forward to seeing your explorations. What else are you working on right now?
Right now, I'm actually just started a residency up in Gloucester at the Rocky Neck Artist Colony. I'll be working with a whale research group called the Ocean Alliance. And I'm working to paint their, they have a shipping container that's a robotics lab on site, and I'll be painting the front face of the robotics lab. That's very exciting. And then the other mural that I mentioned earlier that I might be doing is part of an international mural festival run by Pangea Seed Foundation that's called Seawalls. So there are, I think, 5 or 6 other artists painting murals down in East Boston, and they just started yesterday, and it will be going, I think, until the end of the month. So we'll all be out there painting, and people should come by and say hi. We always like that.
Yeah. So here's a weird question. If you're with the big murals and all this stuff, it seems like very physical. Is that an aspect of it? Like, do you have to like work out? Like, do you have to have like a fitness regimen to do the sort of work you're doing, where you're going out working with robotics labs and working on giant murals?
It's certainly not a bad idea. It is very hard on your back. I've started to find that it's been hard on my hands. I'm starting to get kind of like arthritis, which I'm only 34, so
okay.
It's a little worrying. But yeah, it's definitely physical work. This season specifically, August, September, October, is a very physical time of the year, and then the rest of the year is usually sitting in front of the computer planning. So it's a lot of like frenetic energy right now, and then rest, hopefully.
Yeah. So one more question before I turn it over to Lou, because he usually has some questions. On Facebook, whenever it was, early in the pandemic, you had posted something on your page about Tiger King on Netflix, and I recommended that you see it, and I think you're like, no, it's too much animal cruelty. Did you ever see the Tiger King?
Mm-hmm. I did watch it. I'm embarrassed at that.
You don't have to be embarrassed. It's so. Was it tough to watch for you?
It was everything I thought it would be.
Okay.
And I watched the whole thing. Anyways.
You did. I think it's. I have a for people who haven't. I don't know. Maybe everybody's seen it now. It's kind of hard to jump off that ship once you're on it, right? You do kind of need to know where it's going, whatever your thoughts
Yeah.
might be about the ethics and the I don't know. There's a lot going on there.
If you want to sum up 2020 in one piece of television.
Now it's
That's
starting
the way
to
to do
fade from the consciousness to a certain extent, right? But as far as
Yeah, but
defining,
Carol's going to be on Dancing with the Stars.
Is she really?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, I've stopped following. I mean, and I didn't even see. You know how they released like a final
Yep.
extra episode? I was done with it at that point. But it was.
I think they're making a season 2.
Oh, really?
No, really?
Yeah.
I think so.
Well, but it seems so much of a time, and I'm sure when, Time Magazine or CNN does some like wrap up of 2020, 20 years from now, they're going to mention the Tiger King, and we're all going to say, "Oh, I remember."
It's going to be on the cover of Time when they do the year episode. Yeah.
Sure. So, Lou, you have any questions for our guest?
Yeah, I want to talk about. You obviously have great passion, Sophie, as an activist and with the environment, and I'm guessing other areas politically as well, and obviously great passion as an artist. Do you like the idea of mingling them? You do it quite often. Do you keep some things aside from your artistic side, from the activist side, or are you fully at peace with melding the two things together?
My goal would be to meld everything completely. It's part of my life. It's who I am. So it's for me much more fulfilling to be doing things they're more activist based and pushing forward things that I think are really important. I'm also a working artist, so I won't say no to certain jobs that aren't necessarily activist related. So I try to keep it at a good balance and try to work for people that I care about and want to succeed.
It's particularly challenging, isn't it? Because the area that you're so passionate about in activism in the environment is such a complex issue, and yet you have to make the arguments, you have to make the statement in one scene. So that's a particular type of processing on these issues, isn't it? To be able to distill what is you're trying to say in one scene, one snapshot.
Yeah, I think that's where my training as an illustrator really helps. My 4 years at art school were basically a training in how to convey a message as quickly as possible to a reader. They always taught us that you get about 3 or 4 seconds for someone to understand your image before they turn the page. So if they don't get it, if it's too subtle, they're just going to turn the page and not look at your illustration, and then it's not successful. So I try and bring some of that work into my murals as well, even though you get more time in the mural. I like things to be easily communicated.
You get more time, but people don't have not as many people as you would like have the insight into your image. They'll look at your image and say, hey, isn't that a nice picture of a whale? And they're not getting the rest of the message.
And there are different levels that you can read into art, and I am sometimes at peace with that, and sometimes I wish that there was more. But I think at a certain point, you just have to be okay with some people just thinking it's a pretty picture, and maybe the message doesn't get to everybody. But I think it's worth having out there and worth being able to have conversations about.
I'm going to ask about both sides of it. When did the environmental spark happen? Was there a particular seminal point where you decided, this was something you were going to pursue with an amount of passion, or did it just evolve over time?
I've always been into plants and animals. My grandmother actually was a botanical illustrator, so I grew up with pictures of plants all over the house. But for me, 2016 was a hard year. I started seeing all these policy changes almost immediately as soon as Trump took office that I thought were very detrimental to the climate and to the environment and to animals. So I actually started making a series of paintings in 2016 just as like a cathartic reaction to the policy and the governmental changes that I was seeing.
Yeah, that's your voice, right? So you used your voice to object, to stand up.
Yeah, I mean, using the skills that I have to be an activist. I mean, I'm not a great speaker, I'm not a writer, I'm not influential in many other ways, but this is the way that I can be part of the conversation.
And can you trace us back to your first spark on the artistic side, or was that just something you were born with as well?
I don't have a specific moment, but I think just knowing that my grandmother was a painter and my aunt as well is a really talented artist. Just knowing that it was in the family and that it was kind of an option, and then knowing that my parents encouraged it as a kid, I think was really helpful.
Are you a doodler? Or is there a sketchbook somewhere with all kinds of things in there?
I'm supposed to say yes to that.
No, but you will take a
But
project and sit down and put the project together as opposed to just flowing ideas constantly.
yeah, I'm not a big doodler, and I don't draw every day like you're supposed to as an artist. But when I have a project, I will spend time researching the subjects and drawing the subjects before I put something together.
Well, everybody's got their process, right?
Yeah.
All right, I want to ask about the murals because murals are interesting from an artistic standpoint. You talked about the democracy of it and how it's accessible to everybody, which is an important part of it to you. One of the things about it that artists have to deal with murals is the work is going to erode over time. It's going to show weathering. It's going to age. It's going to chip away, and at a certain point you're going to see that this is an old mural. Have you come to peace with that? Is that incorporated into the work as you do it? How do you feel about that process?
I'm fine with it personally. I see public art as something that should be always changing and always reflecting, the newer voices in the community. I have had clients who wanted to put kind of a clear coat over the mural, which will make it last longer, and I'm happy to do that if that's what the client wants. But I'm kind of at peace. I've only been a muralist for 5 or 6 years, and I've already had a few murals painted over, and it happens.
Yeah. Mural painting also you have to deal with scale a lot. Are you very easy in terms of freehand being up there and laying out your image, or do you do the image on a smaller scale and then somehow scale it up to the mural size?
I do it on a smaller scale, and then what I usually do is project the image at night.
Oh,
if
there
it's
you go.
enough.
Yeah.
And if it's larger, I will actually make a 1 by 1 foot grid and then transfer it that way.
So you're working at night a lot on this, huh? Or at least dark enough to do a projection?
Yeah, sometimes, depending on the area and if I have help. Obviously, it's not always ideal to do that alone. If you're like out up on a lift and your projector somewhere else, someone's going to come by and steal it. So
Doug asked about a particular project that you wanted to do. I'll ask from a mural standpoint, is there a particular venue that you'd like to do, a particular wall somewhere that you've had your eye on going, boy, I would love to work there?
I feel like every time I'm outside, I'm pointing at walls and saying, "Ooh, I want to paint that." But I've been spending a lot of time in Quincy lately, and the MBTA there, they have so many walls, and there's this huge parking garage right off of 93, and it just seems like a really great place to be able to have some public art. That would be great.
So another weird question: do you collect things? Do you collect at all?
I do.
Oh, really? Okay. See, I kind of figured you wouldn't, but I'd set you up for something that's taking me in a different direction. Okay, so tell me about this. What do you collect?
Add a bet against it too.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm looking at I have a feather collection in my car.
Okay. Yeah. See,
I collect natural objects, skulls, different kinds of like bones, rocks, any kind of stuff like that, and plants. I have a huge plant collection.
Okay. So what do you do with your plant collection? What do you mean by I love plants, but I don't have a plant collection. Do you dry them? Do you use them as bookmarks? Like, do you store them? Like, what do you do with plants with a plant collection?
I draw them a lot. I use them as source material. I have 5 or 6 aloe plants that I harvest and use for the aloe vera gel.
Yeah.
And just different. I mean, I guess I don't know if maybe collection is not the right word, but I have a lot of plants, and I love. I only like to have like 1 or 2 of each one, unless I'm using it to harvest. So I like to find different new plants.
Okay, so do you also like grow plants like in your apartment or your living space?
Mm-hmm.
And
yep.
So I guess I start to wonder like this interest is so kind of total, like it's part of your work, it's part of what you do artistically. like, do you also think about like do you drink like herbal teas? Like, are you like surrounded by the plant animal world all the time, even in these things where people normally wouldn't think about them?
I like to be. I think it's really interesting the ways that plants can help us that we've kind of forgotten over the years.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think I just think it's really interesting that nature can provide so much for us, and we don't take advantage of it, and we take advantage of nature in ways that's it's not helping, whereas it's trying to help us in different ways, and we're just ignoring that and doing something else.
Yeah. So, and I have one, last big question, another kind of tricky one that I'm going to throw at you. Maybe it's tricky. You talk about like a democratic impulse with your work, and these murals, they're big and they're bold and they're like social, and yet you talk about yourself as being introverted. And now I certainly can think of artists and particularly kind of writers who are introverted, whose work is very interior, right? It's very like personal. It's very like self-focused, kind of navel gazing, and there's like even kind of spiritually, you think of people who are like that, like just going up and like to the mountains of Tibet, meditating and living on leaves or something like that. But your impulse is actually to go big, to communicate, and to not go interior. And I'm wondering about that. Where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, I've always identified as an introvert. And I think quarantine has taught me that may not actually be the case as much as I think it is. I've found myself really, really longing for connection and conversation with people in a way that I think most introverts would be questioning.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's also because I'm not super outgoing and bubbly and like able to connect with people easily. This is a way that I've found to fulfill that desire, without having to be like a public speaker or in more of like a public role, or in as a boss of other people, or like within an organization. So as a freelancer, this is my way to be able to have community.
Yeah.
Have you done your Briggs-Myers test, Sophie?
I have.
You're an INFJ.
Yeah, I think I am.
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
I think that's right.
And that's a good thing. It fits perfectly.
I mean, but people, there's a range, right? And people can definitely. There are extreme extroverts, extreme introverts, and then most of us are kind of somewhere in the middle. And people can be introverted by nature and still enjoy the company of others and still get a lot from it. And still enjoy human contact and conversation, all the great stuff that comes from it. But it's a question of degree. Too much, and they begin to shut down, and they feel a little
with
drained.
people, it's a drain,
right?
And you only have so much energy to get, and then you have to recharge, and you're ready to go back out again.
And we have a kind of society that's powered a lot of times by more extroverted people, so you're always being pulled outside of your shell, right? So you have to kind of fight to stay inside. Right, but in the face of this pandemic, and you're not alone, right? There's a lot of people who are, I'm a writer and editor, and I'm with a lot of writers and editors, and we tend to be, we like to be by ourselves. Yeah. But it's so extreme for a lot of people now that it's like just boiling, like. Have you thought about say the vaccine is found next week, the pandemic ends. Like, what are you going to do? How are you going to celebrate? What are you going to be able to, what are you going to do? What do you want to see happen?
I mean, honestly, my life, now that we're out of quarantine really strictly, my life hasn't been that impacted. But I would certainly like to be able to share food with my friends and be able to go out without fear. And just hug my parents. It's so strange that I haven't been able to do that.
While we're on the subject, let me ask you this, because you're very environmentally active about it. That's a passion of yours. And with COVID and with whatever else we've been facing this summer here in the United States and an election coming up, it feels like the whole environmental the whole environmental subject has taken a back burner. Are you finding that to be true?
I I think that may be true. I mean, the coronavirus is a result of an environmental issue, as far as I see it. Um, the kind of interconnectedness of the world at this point
Mm-hmm.
is very, it's good in a lot of ways, and it's bad for like invasive species and
Yep.
bringing different organisms such as the coronavirus, like letting things spread so rapidly. So I see it as an environmental issue and an environmental
But the
justice
general
issue.
public isn't thinking environmental issues the way they were, say, a year ago.
Yeah, and I've been hearing that a lot on the news as well. But I think
Well,
I
maybe.
do
I
think
mean,
that
I also, and sorry to cut you off. I wonder what's going to happen, and I wonder what's going to happen partly because I mean, what's happened this year? They can't keep mountain bikes on the shelves, and people just like so many more people are out in the woods and hiking, and like I like to do foraging, right? I do
Yeah.
mushroom foraging and things like that. In the explosion of interest in mushroom hunting in a pretty dry year where there aren't that many mushrooms is incredible. And I just wonder now that people have had this time where they're like connecting in this way, are they
Yeah.
going to see these issues in a different way? I
Yeah.
wonder.
Long-term effects. Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. One thing I wanted to ask you about is you said that you personally haven't been that affected now that quarantine has been lifted, but I feel as though the art, setting aside environmental stuff, the arts in general must be really tough. I mean, it's tough for everybody, right? It's tough for the restaurant industry. It's tough for many people across the boards, right? But for arts organization and artists in general, this has to be a really tough, anxious time. Is that your sense?
I think certainly for arts organizations, especially things that need an audience, um, things like theater and concerts and music, I think those things are going to be very, very impacted. But strangely, mural painting, it's a socially distant practice. It's often outside. And so, you know, after the initial kind of slowdown in May and June, like all of my work has basically picked back up
Hmm.
over the last couple months, and I'm kind of back to where I was as a mural painter. All the shows and gallery things that I was in have been canceled or postponed. That's true, but for me as a muralist, I feel very lucky that a lot of people are still pushing on with their projects.
Yeah. So this makes me wonder, like, what advice you would give to like a young artist, or maybe someone thinking of going to school for art. You know, like a high school student who's like, I have this artistic side, but I'm just worried about the market. I'm worried about making a living. What would you say to that person?
I would say that I think if you have the drive to do it, you should do it. It's not for the faint of heart, certainly, especially when you first graduate from school. You have to be really, really passionate about what you're doing and almost stupidly stubborn about sticking with it.
Hmm.
But I would say that most of the people that I went to school with are now very successful artists within, there's a lot of people that are in video games or computer games or arts admin, a lot of art therapists, actually. A lot of my friends became art therapists, which I think is very interesting.
You may have mentioned it, but just in case you didn't, where did you go to school?
I went to Rhode Island School of Design
Okay.
in Providence.
Cool.
But
So if people want to learn more about you and your work, do you have a webpage? Do you have some way for them to get in touch with you and see what you're up to?
Yep, I have a website. It's my name, sophytuttle.com, Sophie with a Y. But that gets updated very sporadically. Much more updated is my Instagram, which is also my name, just at Sophy Tuttle.
Cool. All right. Well, thank
Yeah.
you so much for being on the 495. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to checking out your. Can people stop by your studio in Lowell? Can I actually go by and see you working there at some point, or is it? Am
In
I
normal
not?
times, yes.
Yeah, okay.
They're having an outdoor studio sale this Saturday. September 5th, but I will not actually be participating because I'll be in Gloucester.
Okay. Have you done so? Western House does these open studios. Have you done any of those yet? Do you plan to be involved with that?
I did their first outdoor open studios last month, and it was really fun. And we had a lot of people, but it still felt very socially distant. It felt really comfortable. So if anyone's thinking about coming but they're not sure, they've been really careful about counting people, and everyone has hand sanitizer. It felt very safe to me.
Cool. All right. So that's this Saturday.
That's this
for
Saturday.
people who just want to check
September 5th.
out Western Ave Studios and find out what's going on there.
Yep, 12 to 4.
All right. Excellent. All right, Sophie, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Lou, thank you very much.
You.
That was fun.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.